Jason Senteney, thank you for coming to the Star-Tribune.
I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, we'll get right into it. So tell us about a vote Cynthia Lummis has made with which you disagreed, and tell us why you would have voted differently.
She voted for the extension of the Patriot Act, which basically extended everything, taking away liberties of Americans. The original Patriot Act was actually a knee-jerk reaction to a really horrific event in our nation's history. I would have gone about it a different way, just because that's something that fit at the time. It was an emotional vote at the time it was originally put forward. But in extending the act, I think we're taking away, of course, the liberties of Americans.
So would you have just ended it entirely, or would you replaced it with something, or what would you have?
I would have ended it.
Parts were valuable, I guess.
We actually have a lot of laws on the books that already pertain to our national defense and national security. If you got rid of the Patriot Act, that would open us back up to using those pre-existing laws. So,
it's no secret that Washington politics are very polarized. How would you succeed in that environment, and how would you ensure that your legislative priorities would be passed or move forward?
First of all, you listen to your constituents. That's who you work for, and that's something that I've found. It seems like a lot of people that are elected to office anymore are out for their own agendas. They stop listening to the people that voted them in the office. What you have to do is put America first. Get over the partisan politics, work together to better the country, not just your own agendas.
Do you feel like that's what's been happening now?
Yes.
So
everybody has a different solution to how they think they're going to make the country better, but in sitting down and talking to each other instead of lobbing uncivil missiles at each other, then you have more emotional votes. And if they'd use more logic in a lot of their votes, I think we could work towards a better country.
So let's talk about a fairly emotional vote. You've seen members of the House and Senate, for that matter, but the House happily take the federal debt obligations to the brink of default.
Yes.
Several times over the last few years. Would you back such a move in the future, and if so, under what conditions?
I believe that shutting down the government isn't a way to go about business. The only people it hurts are the voters, everyday people. There were a number of layoffs or furloughs in the state of Wyoming, and who did that hurt most? It hurt Wyoming's economy. A lot of those people got back pay and stuff, but it also cost us $24 billion during that shutdown. In doing so, we're just wasting money. They can't do that. Once again, that was more of an emotional thing than it was logic. They wasted $24 billion that could have been better spent on veterans' health care or possibly what's going on down on the border right now.
You've talked about in your campaign issues on your website. You
Yes.
talked about cutting redundant federal agencies to save money.
Yes.
Which ones would you consider redundant?
The EPA, for one. We currently have environmental agencies in all 50 states, including American Samoa, Guam, the U.S. Virgin Islands. We built the foundation for environmental protection through the federal agency. Now it's time for that to go and let the states take over. We currently spend, I believe their annual budget is $8 billion, but they're also overstepping their bounds. The Riverton fiasco. That gentleman over in, I believe it's Uintah County, with the pond, they're going to charge him $75,000 a day, yet he's proven that by doing that pond, he's actually expelling cleaner water than it was coming onto his land. So, I mean, they need to use some common sense and quit overreaching, basically. Put it back in the hands of the states.
What other agencies besides the EPA?
I'd like to downsize the IRS. Through my national sales tax plan, we could actually do something like that. Currently, the IRS costs us $12 billion a year, and I'd like to cut that budget to about $4 billion a year. The national sales tax, you'd need less auditors and less employees in that department to actually oversee a program like that and do away with the 74,000 pages of current tax code.
So, but if you're looking at the EPA, there you're talking 8 billion, say IRS 12, even if you
Yes.
downsize that, you're still looking at a pretty sizable federal budget and a sizable federal debt limit,
Yes.
or debt load currently, and yet with your sales tax plan, which we can definitely get into,
Yes.
you're talking about stepping that down to 12% across the board,
Yes.
steps down to 6 after a while. How do you pay your debt obligations with no money coming in compared to what the federal government gets now?
The thing is, there will be money coming in. There's so many loopholes in the system right now that almost anybody and everybody's excluded in one way or another. If you do a national sales tax, what that would do is it would reel in all of the money being spent at the final point of sale. It would also, under the table workers, people like that would now pay taxes. Drug dealers, prostitutes, even illegals coming into this country would now be paying taxes when they go to the store or wherever. Certain things that would be exempt, of course, are like groceries, medical and dental insurance, prescriptions, life essential medical procedures, and I've even been looking into retirement plans as being exempt from that. And of course, all those nonprofit organization churches would still maintain their tax exempt status. In doing the figures, by charging Wall Street, covering derivatives, doing everything of that nature, we're talking over $5 trillion a year, probably closer to $7 to $10 trillion a year, depending on the market.
And yet, you're not talking about this as a replacement for the federal income tax, are you?
Yes,
Or
I
you are
am.
talking about
It's
this
not
as
an
a
added
replacement
tax. We'd repeal the 16th Amendment and replace it with a national sales tax.
So these sound fairly ambitious. How are you going to accomplish any of this?
Person by person, basically. I want to sit down across the table like this and talk to them. Show them the benefits of my idea. We've been doing the same tax system for over 100 years now, and what has it gotten us? Over $17.5 trillion in debt, and like I said, 74,000 pages of tax code, including loopholes and everything else. I also want to work to cut corporate subsidies. In 2013, we paid $154 billion in corporate subsidies. Many of those companies didn't pay 1 cent in taxes. So if we do that, we could start reeling in the deficit and actually start paying it off for future generations.
You mentioned Wall Street transactions.
Yes.
What specifically would you be taxing, and would that be on top of existing taxes on certain transactions? Give me some specifics.
A lot of stocks aren't taxed when you first purchase those stocks. If you apply the 12% at the front end, if they make sound investments, like say Google, for instance, it started out at, I believe it was like $34 when it opened up, and it was being sold at $800 a share by the end of the day. That's a massive increase. So that's a sound investment. They're making their money on their return, and they're not getting taxed on that because the national sales tax would also end, the capital gains tax, death tax, everything of that nature. Now, when we're talking about derivatives, worldwide, the derivatives market is almost reaching $1 quadrillion and shifting that around. In the U.S., I believe it was $60 trillion within the last couple of years is how much was exchanged. They also almost they did cause the economic meltdown in 2008 because it wasn't regulated or seen as a revenue source. If we go ahead and tax those derivatives, we're going to be making hand over fist a lot of money to be putting into the Federal Reserve to pay down our debt, and it would benefit those companies as well as ordinary Americans.
So the sales tax are almost more like a sales transaction tax.
Yes.
You're looking at raising the cost of pretty much all the elements that make the economy move, whether it's buying, selling, moving around, anything on Wall Street is going to cost new money.
There's a thing on the stock market called hyper trading. There was actually a book recently put out about it. What that does is it destabilizes the economy because there's the uncertainty there, and a lot of people don't like uncertainty, and that's what makes our economy go down, because if people are unsure how their investments are going to go, they don't actually feel comfortable putting that money out, and it makes the economy more sluggish.
So how would you ensure that your plan has no loopholes?
Keep it as short and simple as possible, kind of like the Bill of Rights. If it's short and straight to the point, there's no room for loopholes.
But
if
few
they
words can mean very vague things that can be exploited dramatically.
Well,
look at some of the contentions over very simplistic wording in the U.S. Constitution that has persisted problems to this day with arguments over gun rights and a number of other issues.
and it's interpretation based on what part of the country they're from, based on the local dialect. This word means something here, and it means something totally different there. Coke, for example, if you go to Texas and you say, I want a Coke, they ask you what flavor. Dr. Pepper. Up here, a Coke's a Coke. You got to use communication to actually talk to those people and see what you actually mean and put that into words on paper. You can keep it short, sweet, simple, to the point, as long as there's definitions in there that do so.
So who would you consider your chief supporters at this point?
More grassroots supporters, people that see Washington for what it is. The business as usual approach that we've been doing for God knows how long now are actually hurting the middle class and the working class people. And I believe those people are starting to realize that many of the people that are elected in Washington are out for their own agendas, not what's best for the country.
So if I was going to talk to someone who is a big supporter of yours right now, who would I call?
I would have to say Dan Sabrowski. We actually met personally at the Liberty Conference the other day up at the Casper Event Center. Prior to that, we were communicating online. He told me he really liked my ideas, and they're different than the status quo, and that's what he liked about them. And as I'm going to what events I can around the state, I'm getting the same sentiment. People are tired of the same business as usual.
So talk to me about your campaigning. What have you done? How much you've been able to get out in the state?
Since I've been spending pretty much everything out of pocket, I actually turned down a couple of PACs that I don't want to slap them in the face, so I won't actually name them. Since I've been doing it out of pocket, I've been doing what I can to reach out to smaller events, town hall meetings, and stuff like that. Like I said, since it is out of pocket, signs, television appearances, stuff like that are really expensive, and I'm hoping that a lot of the working class and middle class actually relate to that. Most of them are 1 or 2 paychecks away from not being able to pay bills. I'm in that same boat right now. I make a very modest income. I get my bills paid, and with what's extra right now, that's what I'm using to campaign and try and have one-on-ones or smaller events around the state. So I've visited Evanston for the state convention. I've actually been down to Cheyenne a couple of times, up here a couple of times. I'm going to Bighorn County the beginning of next month. I also have an event in Douglas with the Farm Bureau, and then of course the debate in Riverton. And every time I meet somebody in the store or something, I talk to them a little bit and give them one of my cards. I think that's the joy about Wyoming. It is we're more of a people state. Since we do have a lower population, people are a lot more friendly here. If I tried that in some major city, they'd ask me what I wanted, or keep one hand on their wallet while they're talking to me. It's just where we grow up, where we live.
So talk to me about energy exports. It's certainly a big issue in Wyoming with coal
Yes.
and natural gas, and some concern about future markets for some of our resources. What would you do to help those products from Wyoming get to other customers?
The governor's actually doing a really great job of reaching out to foreign investors and whatnot who have interest in coal, natural gas, and things of that nature. I would back whoever becomes governor in January and actually visit with ambassadors to each and every one of those companies, time permitting, of course, and try and sell Wyoming. I mean, it's a great state. It's my home, and it's all of your home. We need to do what's best for the state first, and as a representative of the state, I will fight for the state. So
let's pretend that you get elected and the EPA doesn't get abolished. The EPA is still there. how will you work to define the parameters of the debate about energy and the environment for Wyoming in an environment where the EPA is still a very powerful
Yes.
force and a government agency that does exist?
That's when you go and actually talk to the officers running the EPA and talk to them about possibly coming across in a more advisory capacity, working hand in hand with the state environmental agency and not dictating what they're going to do, but just suggestions. If, once again, they start to dictate, then I'm going to use as many media outlets as possible to publicize those conversations.
Let's talk about immigration. It seems like that's a topic that you're certainly interested to discuss. Tell me where you stand in immigration and with what we're facing right now, specifically with the recent brouhaha over this group of children.
Well, it's not just the children. Basically, people coming across the border, they're getting a notice to appear for future court dates. Now, while they're here in the country, both adults and children, they can use that to travel to meet other family members. They can actually get on planes without a photo ID, just the information they actually gave the courts, whether it's false information or valid information. Get on planes, travel around the country. I believe that actually impacts our national security because everyday American citizens, we have to show forms of ID, passports, whatever to actually be able to travel. And they could be using false information to do so. It's detrimental to our national security to basically close the border. Something I would propose is a certain amount of funds possibly going to a marketing campaign in Central America, Mexico, countries where we have high illegal immigrant populations migrating from, and do a radio and TV blitz saying that if you come to this country illegally, if you breach our border, you will be fingerprinted, you will be documented, and you will never have the opportunity to ever become a citizen of this country. I believe that right there will help promote the legal way of going about citizenship to this country, as well as blocking lawbreakers from entering the country. I also believe in beefing up border security. We have many unemployed veterans right now coming back from, of course, Afghanistan, and many are still unemployed after Iraq. They have patrolling experience. They have perimeter security experience. Why not put them to work with Border Patrol? They already have that experience, and it would take a lot less training than it would be some average citizen off the street that has no experience whatsoever.
For a price, of course.
Well, everything's going to cost.
So you talked about cuts in foreign aid, saying that the foreign aid budget is
Yes.
too large as it is, and saying that would be much smaller. Would you look at this radio and TV blitz as an element of foreign aid, or what would you consider foreign aid?
Foreign aid is actually the billions of dollars we just happen to give foreign governments. Egypt's a prime example. We're not going to ask what you do with it. Here's $5 billion or whatever. In 2013, we spent nearly $60 billion in foreign aid. A lot of that money was supposed to go to good causes, but what did it do? It put entities like the Muslim Brotherhood in power. It put countries that hate us, we gave money. I don't believe in that. I think we should put a $5 billion cap on it.
Including military aid or just financial, just cash aid?
For humanitarian efforts and stuff like that, I believe Congress should vote on it each and every time it happens. Because if we have a natural disaster over in Taiwan or somewhere like that, then Congress can come back to Washington, vote on the amount of aid. But if they had to do that each and every time, it's not a blank checkbook.
But it also won't happen very quickly, and for a humanitarian disaster, time is of the essence.
We reacted pretty well after September 11th. When they have to work together, they actually do. But for the past 10 years, they've never really had to work together. I think if they actually get news feeds and stuff from those areas and see how many people are suffering, I think their heart will actually kick in and they'll speed up the process.
With all due respect, we've had numerous disasters that will get coverage on television,
Yeah.
and the U.S. is not always the first to respond, even regionally, even though we might have some presence. And when we do, it takes time to spool that up. You're proposing now that there be an individual congressional vote on any aid that's provided, even humanitarian,
Yes.
before it's provided.
Yes.
Well, we've cleaned right through a whole list of the questions we had, so which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just in closing, feel free to say you want, but I'm also curious to maybe frame it this way: is why should we vote for you as opposed to your opponent?
Well, the thing is, personally, she's a very nice lady, very personable, charismatic, everything else. She's also a career politician, and I don't mean that totally in a negative way, but if we expect change and to get away from the business as usual approach, we need to put people with new perspectives in there. Working class candidates that actually feel the impact of their decisions in Washington and remember where they came from. I can guarantee I'm going to fight for each and every individual in this state. Just because their personal view might disagree with some of my personal views, I work for the people. I'm not going to vote just based on my views. I'm going to listen to the consensus, and that's how I'm going to vote. And that's something else that's been forgotten in Washington. Everybody else has their own agenda. I want to represent the people of Wyoming. I don't want to be a politician.
Okay, Jason. Well, thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for being very kind to me.